So the sun's out bright now, very bright. All the dogs are laying around. Hi, lazy doggin. Well, the guys fixed the roof with some nails, and I really do like chatting with my friend about designs around here. Cleared out this space to park in. That's cool, right here. It's a pretty cool spot. This is why we need shade out here, though. The sun here, we're almost at 8,000 feet, 2,200 meters in elevation, and that really makes a big difference. You can actually burn quite easily here. Even though you think of like the beach and that's where you're going to get burned because you're running around in a swimsuit or something, but you can get the back of your neck burned here, or your arms or stuff. People have done it. I would recommend that they not do it, and I have advice on how they can not do it. Of course, far be it for me to tell people what they should or shouldn't do if they want to get sunburned and stuff. I want to stop them. If you were to get a sunburn on purpose, you'd probably want to put down a tattoo-like thing, though, so that you could have like a cool pattern. That'd be neat, a temporary tattoo. But I don't recommend it here. I don't use sunscreen at all. I use my straw hat. See this? Nice straw hat. This one has a strap on it because it's a little bit windy out, And these are made right by an island nearby. You got to get one. And these are useful in other climates too. They're just a great type of hat. And you can get cowboy styles and all kinds of styles, more than you could think about. They're really good at hat making. Anyway, in here, the point is that you need a lot of shade. No, the point was about sunburns. That's right. My shoulders are covered, probably best in most cases. Really depends on the time of year. There's a bunch of times a year when it's all cloudy here, and that's my favorite. And it's perfect for photography. And so really, like the best time to come here if you're a documentarian and you want to use the outdoor set as much as possible, my recommendation would be to target coming during the rainy season. And the ideal time, and I should really, decide that this is kind of what that month is for, is actually, let's see, we go January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August is one I often forget. August, September, that makes sense. October, November. September and October are going to be the ideal times to come to the Bosque for doing video. And that is because our planting is done. We are approaching the dry season. I would say November really begins the surely dry part of the year. But in those 2 months, the forest is also very green because we've just had the rainy season. And so you do got to make sure you're prepared for rain. We don't know. Some years there's late rains and some years there isn't. And I prefer there be late rains. I'll do rain dances if I have to. I want more rain here. But I can't control that. So all I can do is do better with what I've got. But anyway, so I would recommend that as the best time to come here if you're being a documentarian. We have had some cloudy days randomly, but it's not reliable enough, which is even one more reason to build more sets here that are dusk or dawn friendly, particularly dusk, because dusk is warm out. And so I think dusk is probably an underutilized time to just run around real quick and make videos. I think I mentioned this in some other video. Big surprise. Repeated myself. I actually don't mind that I repeat myself because I have a lot of complex ideas I would like to impart that are very pragmatic and have to do with how we can actually live. So they're not just all esoteric weird shit. And so the thing is, with such a complex set of ideas, one idea always references another, almost, or several, and things are connected together and stuff. No, all is not one, everything is not connected, but there are more important and relevant connections between some things. We can learn what those are, and then work within those systems to get the results we like. So, it probably doesn't make sense to some people, but maybe it does to you. Anyway, so that's why I don't mind if I repeat myself. It's, I've had a very long bunch of years here at great difficulty to learn the things I have. Scary guy face up there. I put a scary face up there. We got the branches out of here. That's good. So this is the weather station right there. Even though it's windy, the little wind thingy isn't recording stuff. Theoretically, this records rain and temperature, and I should have had this up a long time ago. And I'll tell you what happened is I bought it, and I love sciencey things, you know. I like measuring stuff. I think that we have to expand our consciousness literally, and that often science is the way to do that. So my weather station needs to have a better pole, needs to be fixed in better, because I just stuck it in there because I wasn't sure where I wanted to put it, and then stuff grew around it. Also, I wasn't paying attention to it because I did not believe I had enough electricity to run it. And the thing is that it's run by battery. The sensor thing, I believe, is run by battery. It better be, or I don't know what their charger is, maybe. I think it is. And then it automatically will broadcast to a website using the internet. And that's great. But I felt like I didn't have enough electricity to use the internet at night. Like, I couldn't just leave it on. I couldn't leave the router on, you know. And I used to be much more careful about electricity. Now I still have to be. But my batteries are dying anyway at this point. And so, you know, I'm just seeing what I can get out of them. And of course I need to get new batteries. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It won't require any more electricity hardly than I'm using now. So that'll be a really fun project. Get that weather station going. And then you'll be able to see the weather here online on a website. So I got a white dog here. That's Coco. And I also got my white buckets. I have some black ones here as well. That'll be a good start. What I like about these is it'll be even easier to paint on them what their purpose is. Because buckets move around, and a 5-gallon bucket is a great form of waste. Lots of products get moved around. You know how shipping containers are neat if you can get one? I don't think I can get one on my road, but these are like a waste product for shipping a thing. And they're strong. And they are plastic, which I realize is bad. I actually have a rule against plastic here, and I break it whenever I feel like it. Whenever I feel like that pencils out for me. And having containers of this size, right? Having these things with a handle that I can get for about $2 now. The price has gone up. They don't always come with tops. I'm trying to get ones with tops because I have other uses for ones with tops. These get used for everything. Big use is planters, because we do a lot of plant propagation, and when you look at the cost of any kind of put a plant in it object, right, and you want it to be bigger than old Coke bottles or something, or old, you know, plastic bottles, which are still plastic. In fact, those degrade in the sun quicker, and so they're going to pollute your land more. So yeah, these don't go bad in the sun very quickly. It takes years and years and years and years before they break and weaken. We do drill holes in the bottom of the ones we use as pots, and we grow trees in there 4 to 5 years, or sometimes more, before they're ready to be put out in the forest. So essentially we use them for the nursery, plant nursery. I'm using them right now to carry stuff around because I'm having some mobility issues, and I can use them to fill it with stuff I want to go upstairs and then carry the bucket instead of having a bunch of little things. So I'm just using it as general carrying items. I use them as waste paper baskets. And then that paper later can get burned or composted, depending on what seems to make sense that day. I could actually use paper waste better. I could better save it for times we want to start fires. Like have a big paper store is what I should have, a place where paper is stored. And then shiny paper we want to avoid because you can't compost it. And so I guess we could burn it. I don't know if there's weird toxins in inks or anything. But generally we want to avoid producing paper garbage that is bad, and we should actually think about that, like what kinds of paper we can avoid having come in, and does it really matter at all? I don't know if it does. It may not be worth our time to think about. And then cans, bottles, that kind of recycling can go in 5-gallon buckets. I'm thinking at the cabana level, you know, or here. I actually use one as a pee bucket because I got used to this when I was in bed and couldn't get out. And I got used to peeing in a medical jar and then tossing it in the bucket. And I still do that sometimes. Normally I pee out the window because my pea garden's currently broken, but we're working on the pea garden today. And I need to buy a funnel. That's my blocking issue. So it's actually the problem's up there, not down here. It could be in use right away. So, yeah, that's my buckets. So there is the idea of creating oases. Oases. I guess it's oases, right? More than one oasis. Multiple oases. Oh, no. A bunch of those oasis things. The idea is to make a stack of rocks that the dogs can't get up onto. We don't care if other wildlife can get onto it, and there's a lot of wildlife that can actually get a lot further, easier up things than dogs can. So any kind of wildlife is fine, even though, we're not a big fan of the squirrels because they steal all of the fruits from the trees currently, but we're going to work on owl boxes and balance that system out. Let's not talk about those complexities. Let's get back to this very exciting idea of the oasis. The oasis is then a stone structure built around a tinaco. We're going to use a tinaco because we know exactly how much water it has in it. And it's tricky because we want access to the tinaco. So at the top of the tinaco is a false roof. And then other stuff happens around that. But you have to be able to get into the roof. The cool thing is nobody's going to climb up there because you're not allowed to, right? It's not built for that. And this tinaco is full of water. But so we can have a way to get up there, like secret steps that we build into the structure near the end of its rock work. But that way the tinaco's clear. We then are able to put pumps into it. And this is where the fun starts to happen. We put pumps in that pump up water up into something that then drains back into it probably. With a screen. So then we have that drip down the wall. Now, how that all shakes out is a question that we should consider in terms of design, and I'm open to all kinds of ideas. My primary thing is I want to lose very little water to evaporation, and I want to make the water available to birds. My recommendation would be to have shaded alcoves on the north side, like little spots with overhangs that they're out of the sun, and the water therefore evaporates less quickly. Also, that would be really great for bird photography. If you had on your tripod your camera set up on some locations on that, and you just wait for a bird to land there and take a little bath or drink a little bit, and you zap them with your camera. There was a hummingbird. Oh, that's a cutie. Wait, that's not a hummingbird. It's a very small bird though. It's a black bird with white on its wings and a red belly. I need to look that one up and know it. It's been showing up all over here. I have water features here. They're called dog water dishes or dog water bins. I've got 2 of them. Bees take the water out of them. Birds take the water out of them. The oasis would help all kinds of wildlife, mainly birds is what I was thinking. But and there can be different locations within it, But I guess evaporation was one of my concerns. The other thing is, when should the water flow? Ideally, there would just be a pump. It's a very brave little bird. Notice I have a tile in the bin there, and that's because that gives the bird something to land on. If you don't do that, then sometimes really desperately thirsty birds will take a bath and they get tired and then die in it. Or if they go into a 5-gallon bucket that has water in it or something. So we have to be very careful with what water we leave around. And so when we think about an oasis, we want to use that water very carefully. Our goal is to have some system that collects water and goes into that. Well, that's tricky, and I need a portable pump and generator and all sorts of stuff so I can move water better. But really what this means is that the tinaco should be filled with overflow from some other tank in some easy places, right? And we should build the first one in a place that the water issues are pretty simple. And we have buried tubes down to it, right? So we could bury a black tube that would go down and maybe even feed more than one oasis, right? We don't know how big these are going to be. I'm imagining them to be not much bigger than a tinaco. And then how big is the tinaco? Is it a 7,000 liter one? Or should we go ahead and make ones with the smallest tinacos? Well, the smallest tinacos are kind of short and don't hold as much water, but it would allow us to do experimentation right away at a level we can deal with. I don't have a lot of courtyards. If I had one, I would put one in one that the dogs wouldn't get at it. My concern is if it's too short, that the dogs will get into it and disturb things. And the dogs also sometimes think they hate birds, although I believe that they mostly just hate the turkey vultures. That's their enemy or something. I don't know why. What a cute bird. Anyway, these oases would massively skyrocket the bird life here. I'm doing other things to improve habitat. Habitat is less a problem than water is. Water, I could have 10 times as many birds here very quickly. So the idea is even to set these things up with kind of drip locations. The reason I mention it running back in is because I don't want that much water out there, really. Now the problem with running it back in is I'm aerating it and running it back in. Now I've got more air in the water, and the way I have good water here is I keep it very still. So I don't know about the idea of, actually I don't like it. I don't like the idea of having water go out and then back into the tank. I want to deliver clean water to the tank, you know, that's already doesn't have leaves in it and shit. You know, in other words, don't slack off on the system because we still have pumps involved, probably. It's possible. I mean, I could put a tank uphill and there could just be a tube going into the rock sculpture, but I still want the rock sculpture to be kind of big, and I like to hide tinacos. So I think that building over the tinaco remains the best idea. It does make it completely immobile. So you would have to dismantle the entire thing and then use those pieces as rocks to build a new one if you wanted to get at it. But if it's all covered up and protected from light, including, like, you could put a top on it, like you could put a wooden top on top of it, or somehow protect it from the light on the top, and if it just had rocks right around it, then that would stay just absolutely crystal clean. So then how do we get the water out of the tinaco onto the rocks at the right rate? Because we're going to assume it's filled at the end of the rainy season. In the rainy season, the oasis will have little pockets that fill up with water anyway. It's already a natural bird bath, and definitely focus on that. Like, you're not just having water from the tinaco, at least with some of these, but make multiple thing bird baths and lots of them. Figure out how to do a concrete mold in a pleasant shape, and then put that on, you know, cob pedestals or something, really thick cob pedestals. And what we have is a natural bird bath that causes something to occur that you may not think about. You know, you think, oh, rainy season, there's lots of water for the birds. That's what I would think. But you know, you really start to evaluate that and you realize it's totally wrong. That water soaks in really quick. They get morning dew and stuff, but there's no water feature here. That's why they like my dog dishes so much. So even in the rainy season, they need to have pools of water. And so we could make kind of sculptures that were just designed to be bird baths. And maybe they're only filled during the rainy season, or maybe we set them up so that we can actually fill them from above. This is true at the oasis, when we want to. Now, as the oasis, I'm picturing a continuing system. I can't use gray water that well for this. I know there's people who say, oh, you can use gray water for birds. I don't want to. I don't feel like it. Gray water's an unknown thing. I don't know who used the sink. I don't know what they put in it. It's not going to birds. And I have other ways to do with gray water. And I'm not going to filter it or something or do anything tricky. I don't have time for these kind of things. I'll do something smart, but not very tech heavy. So as we think about, okay, let's just think of the one, okay? The one oasis, which is around a tinaco. Let's pick a 5,000 liter tinaco, okay? That's big enough. We're going to have the top of it be kind of shaped, and it's all going to end up rockwork later, okay? We have to have a way to get water into it, and we should bury a hose that goes down and then up into it, and we can deliver water from another spot, and that spot should be higher up. That's so that we can siphon into an entry point up above to fill that tinaco, because it doesn't have its own rain catchment. That's for when we would deliver water to. The other option is just overflow from an existing system. That's a lot easier, actually, and it will take care of itself. It'll fill itself. So the question we're still on then is, how do we get it out of there at the right rate? Well, I often think of these electric fountains and things, but I don't have electricity a lot of places, and I have some other problems with it. We could run them on solar panels. All of them are made to make little fountains. And maybe a little fountain in a big system is no big deal. Maybe we do set up a tiny little fountain like that, the smallest that they sell, really, because we're trying to have water all day long. Now, it would be neater if it pumped on a timer. That just adds complexity. So one calculation is, what's the flow rate of the smallest pumps I can buy? Okay. I almost kind of want to consider things that just drip something, you know, like really low rate. But we can do a calculation of at the flow rate, if it's full in a certain month, like November, okay? And maybe we even shut it off at most of the year. Maybe there's this off switch, you know? Although why bother? It's water. And yeah, we don't care. So just let it run. And so it runs for from November all the way until, I would say, June. I'm going to say June because the rains are not yet reliable. So that's November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. 5, 6, 7, 8 months it needs to make it. 8 months of supply. So that the tank has to be big enough for that. Or it can be created not to run all the time. And it already is, because it doesn't run at night. So you have to calculate what's the hours of sunlight. And this can be looked up on weatherspark.com. They have different months and how much solar energy occurs. And so we could actually calculate how long the pump probably ran. We should hook a pump up right now and start testing this. But the smallest, tiniest pump, now if it breaks, you have to have a backup. So you might even want to just go ahead and do 2 of those so that you know it will never fail. And again, you want to have it shaped on the outside, all this rock work, to go up quickly so that the downslope is very steep. It's too steep for a dog, okay? And then the other parts, the only reason we can get up there is because we have handholds that we can reach up onto and then step up onto something and then have a couple easier spots up there higher. And then somebody can hand you a 5-gallon bucket or something, or I don't know what you need to do up there. But you got to check on the pumps and see if they're working. If it was done nearby to the main electrical system here, and if we get our system improved at all, we could just hook it into the primary solar power system. I like that, and I don't like it. I like the decentralization of the other solution. I like that it's a solution we can do anywhere and not worry about where it is. So I'm very interested in the very small solar powered pumps that only pump during the day, no battery, therefore. But we could also have solutions in other places where we could have, for example, an on and off switch for an oasis, where we just decide that when we want to. We could put on a timer. It could be running at night. It could have LEDs behind the little rivulets of water. Running it at night will result in a lot less evaporation because the air can't hold as much moisture. And so I don't know what the difference in evaporation would be from between day and night. But during the day, if it's in the sun, for example, which it commonly would be, I bet you the evaporation rate is 4 or 5 times what it would be at night. When the air can't actually hold any more moisture, that's why the dew comes down. The increasingly cold night is dry air, but it can't hold much. And so it won't pick up any evaporation. It could be like right here. This is a good example, actually. I'm at the view porch, and we could actually build water features. As long as we put them off the ground, there could be small electric ones here. And I saw some at a store. That store was located somewhere. It's on the road to somewhere. Sherilyn might know. Might be on the road to between Quiroga and Morelia. But there was a place with big pots and had a lot of fountains. Other places have these fountains too. And so I think the fastest way for us to rapidly get water features that we like and really benefit from immediately in a huge way, I think I should do this right away, is we have electric out here, in this spot. It's shaded, and so we can see birds better, and it's a comfortable spot for people. The dogs are here a little too much, but if we build a kind of a watering fountain up high enough, and we move this thing over probably, so we could put it kind of more centrally and on a nice stone base. And it would have to be a fountain that doesn't break, because I bought fountains before, and it was like Cantera or something, it broke. So I need really strong made stuff. It could be cast concrete, I don't care. I just need it to not break. And it should be aesthetically pleasing and really easy for birds to land on. And I would like one that's facing this way. There are ones that are round, and those are cute. They're great. But I want one that all the water is falling down in a waterfall on this side into little troughs and then getting recycled. I'd like it to be big enough so I don't have to fill it that often. And I want to set it up on a switch, which can be just right over here. It's no problem. So that I can turn on and off that fountain really easily. And that way I can decide to what degree I want to have it on or off. If they had one with LED lights in it, now I know that's asking a little much, but I would be willing to do that. It's tempting to think about motion sensitive lights, but I think it would surprise the birds. But I'm surprised the birds come in as close as it is. Now, most of them won't. Okay, so this is a very specific use thing. It's only going to solve for some birds. I think the main exciting thing is that it's so close in and easy to see. So I think there is value to making them closer into houses, and really with anywhere with an electrical system, which will be everywhere. We could think about outside of almost any place where people would sit or be, for a time, that we could put in water features, and one way or the other. It could be that they're manually just filled and they're a bird bath. Those work just fine. I think it's complexifying things a bit much to put in an electric fountain, also because they dry up a lot, because people don't pay attention to them. So if I can't get anyone to fill bird baths now, what am I going to do with fountains that are running without any water? That's the problem. So I like the idea of if there's more people there, they'll fill it. If there aren't, there won't. But I also, filling them once is like a commitment to the birds. And so I think there's an ethical responsibility if you start providing something for someone or some being, like a bird, that the bird should not be damaged by what you are training them to do. You're training them to be dependent on a water source. If you suddenly destroy that water source, you have broken a kind of a responsibility, I believe, as an organism, and, especially as an organism that we build the environment. We change the environment. Now, I'm changing it for the better, but what if I change it for the better and then, I suddenly fail to maintain those systems, and all of a sudden the birds are really thirsty and potentially die? Now, that's a pretty dire way to put it, because they're living here now, but they would have to spread out and look for new foods or water, and they don't have anywhere close by to get water. I don't know where they get water now. There used to be a pool up there and some rocks. I think that goes dry now. I'm not sure. It's been dry for a couple of years, these years. But there used to be water in the barrancas and things. Anybody who wants to talk to me, anything I propose to do, people will always criticize me. And one of the criticisms could be, you're changing the environment. Well, yes, and it's risky. And I take this, great responsibility completely with seriousness. And I wish to be a good person in the universe and do good things. Anybody who wants to criticize me about it better do so in a reasonable way that understands what I'm doing and why. And they might want to read and think first, because I just don't like talking to people who don't read and think. There used to be water in these barrancas, right? So what I'm doing is restoring a resource that used to be here. And I've talked to older guys, and they say, yeah, water used to flow down these barrancas. Big surprise. I mean, that's how they got there. They were creeks and ravines, at least a lot of the year. And they have springs up there that are all tapped off. Anyway, so there was a lot more wildlife up here before. I would say that if I was going to imagine this forest with water and without it, I would guess that there would be huge, massive tons more wildlife, because that's the number one resource lacking. And there's plenty of plant matter to eat, and there's plenty of animals that eat it. There's plenty of insects to eat, and there's plenty of animals to eat them. The chain breaks down when we remove the water source, and then there isn't anything eating the plants, and then there's also no predators. And so it's probably not so much the hunters around here that killed off the larger wildcats and stuff that they have here. And actually, there are still some wildcats here, but they're very shy and probably barely making it. I mean, what are they supposed to drink? I bet you that before this happened, that there was a massively active cycle of all kinds of animals here that was way more. Like you could go hunting here and get stuff all the time. I'll bet that. With water coming down, with these kind of forests, everything's very changed now. Like it used to be more oak forest, now it's more pine. It's going back to oak here. But all the water's been tapped off by humans. As soon as the humans tapped that, they killed off more wildlife than a ton of hunters. I think hunting can be done totally sustainably. I don't think tapping off springs can be. And that's why I understand why people do it. It's to get water. But the fact we now understand rain capture so well, we have the resources right now. We are a much richer world than they were back then. We have the resources to build water storage systems, and we have the resources to use far less. In other words, we could go in the other direction. And I don't know who I'm talking to. Am I talking to people who live here? Yeah. I want them to do that because I want good neighbors who are in good position with lots of resources and are happy and healthy and live in tune with the environment. But I'm also talking to anybody else in the world. And your specific environmental challenges may be different, but the role of conservation and restoring habitat is really important, because I look at this and, I mean, if you just come here and you don't know the history of it, then you would think, oh, it looks like a great forest. And it is a great forest. But it's a very thirsty forest is what it is. It used to have more water. And there used to be more rain. The people around here believe, old people believe, that there's much less rain than there used to be, and that does not bode well. That is a very bad thing. Because, I moved here as a climate risk. It's a choice I made. I think it was a good choice. I don't know what will happen in 10,000 years, but I won't be in an ice age probably, unless the whole world is in one. And there's been civilizations here for a long time. So I feel comfortable choosing a climate and that has supported a lot of life in the past. But I think that we're looking at a lot of degraded landscape everywhere. Very degraded landscape. And that's our fault. We did it. And we can take an active role in restoring that landscape. And as a person who's a custodian of dirt, of earth for a while, I believe I have a responsibility to do that. And I would encourage anybody who's a larger landowner to think about, bigger scale land restoration and also land enhancement. Just because we have destroyed everything in the past does not mean we're obligated to do it in the future, although we should be very suspicious of any plans we have. Very suspicious, because we're good at destroying stuff. And we have to train ourselves out of that, and we have to train ourselves into behaviors which actually enhance the natural world around us. And that can be as simple as, looking at how the water runs off your building. That's a big one. Water runoff. I mean, none of it should be wasted. It should automatically make bogs and gardens and things, and we should avoid mosquitoes. We should collect it for drinking water if we can. I mean, that's one of the biggest wasted resources in the world is rain. Just rain from the sky. And a lot of places have more of it than I do. In a lot of places, it comes at more times of the year, and so they don't have to store as much, right? So it's cheaper for them. It's expensive for me because I've got, 4 months of rain, barely 2, it feels like. I mean, I did not get enough rain last year or the year before. And and you got to survive the rest of the year. But if you get consistent rain, you're fine. So the thing is, we're in this position where we've stolen the water from the land, right? We've stolen it from springs. We steal it out of the lake. We use water for industry, agriculture. Agriculture is a big one. We truck it around with gasoline. We're not doing it right. So it's almost lucky that here right now, agriculture isn't the primary industry, although it is growing in a couple areas. But a lot of food's imported. So we're basically exchanging payment of gasoline for getting food from some other system, largely industrial systems. So that's tricky. All the parts of the water system need to be investigated. My solution for the agricultural problem for an area is to plant tons and tons of food that you can eat that doesn't need any water or fertilizer. As soon as you give in and start using water, I already have a little bit, then you're breaking the rules and you're planting inherently unsustainable things. Like, draining aquifers all the time that don't recharge real quick. You're just headed for destruction. That's just so obvious. If you're tapping up off the springs and then you have no wildlife and stuff and your forest is lost, it's a lot of its life. You literally killed part of the forest biosystem. So anyway, by making these oases, and also making ones that deer can use, for example, that's a trickier thing, but there are deer here. I've seen tracks. we could actually right here, right now in one place, increase the total amount of wildlife existing. For other large landowners, it could be a much harder thing. I'm practically interested in, I want to collect all the rules that I have come to believe on this scale, and then wonder how those would scale on a much larger landscape, and then contact the large landowners, for example, in the United States or really anywhere. Contact people who are owners of large amounts of private land and say, wow, here's a certain things you could do to evaluate your past damage that your land actually has. That may not be obvious. It may look perfectly fine. But who knows? If when they build a dam or they do this, or things change landscapes. Luckily, if the bigger land is, the more likely it is to be undeveloped. And so you're probably starting off in good shape. This place, before I even got here, had gone through some phases of some change, So, but anyway, and then after figuring out the problems, decide responses to those, if any, and then decide, well, on this list of a set of values and potential uses for my land, what do I want to do with it? What are all my options? And one of them is to make sure it goes into the hands when you die of somebody who will take care of it. I'm dealing with that right now because I'm going to make a list actually of people to give my land to when I die. And I'm not going to tell people who's on it because I don't want them to kill me. But I want to find like 10 people who don't know, but they know they're on the list. 5 would be better than 1. So that's tricky. And I think I should really look online for that and find people who already have some experience and they have something to invest as well. And their proposals for carrying this place to the next level. This is one of the reasons that I'm recording so many videos in different locations on the property, because then I can look at those, I can type in the ideas that I had on the site, because it's hard to write them down right there. Better to just make a video, show it, sometimes it's part of the brainstorming process and it's educational anyway, and then collect all of these different plans into a big guide for development, essentially, of how we can increase wildlife, increase plant diversity, increase biomass, and have people here benefiting a little bit from the forest, but kind of more on the side of not damaging it. I think it's very important because almost all systems we create, we damage too much. So I think we should feel humbled and intimidated that we get to be here in this forest. I think anybody who's here would hopefully enjoy the experimental part of this, of changing our human behavior to fit in with a vision of a world that doesn't have to completely be dead. How can we survive in the future, whatever humans live through collapse, right? I tend to believe that things are going to collapse, and so do a lot of other really smart people who think about things. And so how are we going to live after that? And I want to mix, primitivism and old ways we've done things, but not just one way, but collected from every single culture around the world of how do they weave this, how do they make a container, how do they deal with this resource or that. Every creative idea we can come up with and collect those. That's our primitive knowledge set. I don't use the word primitive pejoratively, by the way. I like it. I want to be more primitive. I want to be more radical in terms of it meaning the roots. I want to get back to the best that we had ever and everywhere. And that's not going backwards. That's an enhancement, We have already benefited, in building a civilization that is unsustainable, but we've already benefited from trade, cultural interchange, and so we want to really make a cohesive effort to collect everything. It doesn't even matter if it's a kid's toy. I want every kind of handmade kid's toy you can make with products in the forest. I want them all made. Not my biggest priority. Survival and things are more important right now, but and then there's another part to that, and part of the idea of going back, a lot of people, I think that sounds bad to them, and the truth is it sounds bad to me too. I don't want to lose out on some of the great things we have now. Our scientific knowledge of even microbiology keeps us from dying as easily from dumbass shit, and we can compost our shit safely. We understand how these things work. We can understand disease prevention. We can understand medical care and proper responses to things that aren't just superstitions. Not all that primitive stuff is good. Lots of it's just made up dumb shit to control people, just like it is now. Anyway, so we have this scientific knowledge now that allows us to act in ways that we can better see the future. We understand the experimental process better. I'm doing agricultural experiments here that, I don't think that most beings would have been able to do 3,000 years ago. I just have a better thousands of years of scientific awareness, and I'm not even a fancy scientist, but I know enough to know what I'm looking for. And I don't have to, get so confused. I mean, the mushrooms are all tested. We know what they are. They're identified. We have their scientific names. People have done their thesis on each one, more than one person. And then we've got all these other species. And so we can relate to the natural world better. We can also see the trajectory that humanity has been on, and I think more people will see this later as collapse occurs. But why do I have a hat on in the shade? And we can realize that the general trajectory of humans, the general things we do, are destroy everything around us in the natural environment. There are places that used to be lush, and now they're not. And you can start to think of a list of the types of places and how they got that way. It could have been a really long time ago, and there was a civilization there, and now it's desert. There's places like that. There's places where we've removed the mountaintop or whatever to mine it. Mining has a bunch of interesting effects on waterways, and those will clean up eventually. But opening the earth up and just ripping it open like we do causes a lot of things that are different. Now, I don't know if that's that bad, and I don't know what percentage of land in different places is mined. If it's a very small percentage, it barely matters. If it was like we ripped up 1% of the land, that land will restore and actually have a different biosystem that evolves into it. Because I also think about things like when cities fall, when we largely abandon cities and use them for scrap, that's going to be amazing habitat. In particular, you can imagine, how when a ship goes down and then it sits in the ocean for a while, and in many climates that becomes a hub of life because it has a lot of edge. It has a lot of little spots to be in, have your little babies and build your little house if you're a fish type person, or what mollusk, or I don't know what is down under the ocean, but it becomes habitat. We're complexifying the habitat, and actually the net result is probably positive. It sounds nice. I've heard of attempts to use concrete blocks to increase oyster locations, and not necessarily as a commercial venture. And also coral reefs, attempts to restore coral reefs. Anyway, if we see ocean rise and we see a whole bunch of cities go down, we're going to have a lot of debris in shallow water. That debris is going to become amazing habitat for a lot of life, and it could even affect the evolution of the organisms in there. And it also might be kind of hazardous, which would be helpful because then people won't go in it as much. We kind of hope it is hazardous to people, like maybe scuba divers can go check it out and make some cool movies for us, but we need more spaces that people can't go. I think that's a good idea there. I don't know how I got off talking about that. Well, we're talking about water in general. I'm going to bring up a different issue, and it doesn't totally apply to here. I have really pretty clean rainwater. However, it's really handy to be able to filter water. Now, if you were desalinating water, if you're on the coast, that's a great idea. And there's a lot of great work being done. There's a guy named Yishan Wang. He was on Quora before. I believe he's former Reddit CEO. And he has a project in Hawaii. I forgot the name of it, but you look it up, Hawaii Yishan Wang, you'll find it. And he's using solar panels to power desalination. And I think he's not using batteries, which is great, because the big problem with batteries, with solar power systems, is the batteries. That's the most toxic, short-lived part, and they're heavy and annoying. So I'm not sure how he's doing it. The picture I saw on his website was this big wall with big tanks and stuff, wall of tubes and stuff. Looked way more complex than anything I want to get involved with. Now, of course, I don't have seawater anyway, so what do I care? I could purify other water that way, but I already have other ways here to do it. So it's not top of my list, but as far as technologies worldwide that would be useful, desalination is actually a really good project to work on. So Yishan's work seems pretty cool, where they're taking water out of the sea, desalinating, and using it for agriculture. And agriculture is the most expensive use of water in our societies, mostly. It depends on where you live. Even if it wasn't where you live, where your food comes from, that's what matters. So if your food's coming from far away and a lot of water is being used for it, that kind of goes on your water debt. That's the water cost you are in the world. So anyway, so I like the idea that he's doing it for agriculture. He also has a project where you have a big greenhouse for plant reproduction, and I find that neat. Again, a very high-tech solution by my standards. It looks great. They ship it to you in a shipping container. And I think the desalination one, they'll also do that. I'm not sure if they're doing that yet. And then they have another thing that is seed storage, I believe. So multiple cool projects, all based on shipping containers. I talked to a different friend of mine who's pretty private, so I won't say his name. But he was also interested in, after disasters, having shipping containers with everything you need being delivered to an area. Anyway, so those are really great projects attacking two of the biggest things, because you could also use a desalination plant to provide water in an emergency zone, and we're going to have emergency zones on the coast. Our coasts are going to be abandoned. I mean, like 80% of people live on the coast, right? We're going to have to pull back from the coast and hopefully build buildings in a way smarter way than we do now. And I can make recommendations about that. In most places in the world where there's the biggest populations, the largest cities in the world, you can't retrofit them that easy, but you can start to dig in. Now, in one that wasn't being hit by the ocean, you could just go out from the city and dig a ring of actual good cities around what is going to become your scrap heap. You're going to harvest things out of that's old town, that's old ways. You know, we used to build cities wrong, and any city that needs any energy for heating or cooling is built wrong. And so when you build the new cities, as you abandon the old ones, you can dig in. And that's true whether it's a hot climate or a cold one. And that's because the Earth has a moderate temperature, moderately chilly actually, which is great because there's a wide variety of problems that happen from being too hot and humid too. So by digging in, we can ideally develop a architecture of it, I think is really important, that needs no weird machine or electricity in any way to heat or cool the building at any time during the year. That's doable. Okay? We've got to stop thinking in terms of the solutions that are high-tech, that we know work, that we can rely on. Somebody engineered them, they're great. No, we need to build the whole building in a way that we can control airflow, we can control how the sun is used within it. And, you know, maybe we have a cosmetic fire within it, but we shouldn't even need a fireplace. Yeah, we can put a fireplace in the base. But if we need to heat it, we should be doing that with evacuated tube solar hot water heaters, which I do question those as well because I can't make one. So that's a shorter term thing. Maybe we should make sure we have those fireplaces built down inside the building, and certainly we want to make sure we have glass that channels the sun in, but I also can't make glass. So, I mean, it's really a question of how far you think collapse is going to go here. I would like to think it's going to go pretty far. So I want to think of the design of the building such that it doesn't need any fancy gadgetry. Imagine we're just building a cave-like building that we try and design so we capture all of the water and store it, all of it that we need, even if things went different than they are now. Okay, more than you need if you can do it. Yeah, more than you need. And then there's a lot of peripheral systems I'm designing around that and use of plant propagation, etc. But then also getting the heat of the sun in there, having the coolness of the earth for food storage, so root cellars buy it, but not under it, because we're going to heat that ground up, right? And then and then full rain capture, and then the building is almost totally set. We've tossed in some solar for electric because we can. Because we're making a cave-like place, I would recommend going kind of heavy on the LED lights. You know, really do some work to look at what the best brands are, test them, plug some in a dark location, and just let them run and see how long it takes till they die. You know, have a LED testing station or something. But motion-sensitive LEDs, could have LEDs for plant starts. You could have a grow room for really small babies, and before they're even ready to go out into your other spaces. I don't know. You could experiment with things like microgreens and UV lights and whatever, but I don't know. I'm not big into that. I'd rather develop outdoor systems of agriculture. On the other hand, the Wally Pini idea is very, very attractive. And the Wally Pini is basically a dug-in greenhouse. And the way I see that, since I'm digging my buildings in anyway, I can kind of combine a lot of these systems together. I mean, you can have a mostly underground house that has strong sun shining in on a spot that gets really great light for a bed of plants. You know, and you look at earthships. You know, the whole south side, they're using it for agriculture. And it doesn't just have to be the south side. So the idea of digging in various ways, it almost doesn't matter how. You know, like I'm imagining an east-facing dug-in building, and it gets the morning light. Great. It doesn't have light the rest of the day, but it warms up quickly after the cold night. And then if it's well insulated, you have it really nice for a while. And then a tiny fireplace could even keep it going. I mean, I don't know. I get ideas for so many different forms of buildings. But forming even buildings such that they have plants built into them is a brilliant idea. And it gets back to the Earthship idea. But we can do that in other ways as well. So anyway, I've lost my train of thought. Or tired or something. I got some more coffee. So one thing to consider with the design of all these buildings is the seasons and what problem you're trying to fix. Like during what time of the year do you need to cool down the average temperature of the building? And during what time of the year do you need to heat it up? In this climate, it is almost always the case that the building should be heated. And the larger building would tend to be colder. With more thermal mass, it's going to be more the temperature of the earth or the dug-in building. And so we actually want to heat those up with solar or evacuated tube solar hot water heaters, right? And so we don't have to think too much. Now, different places have more trouble. Like, let's go with New York, okay? What's the trouble in New York? Well, I've never been to New York. That's a problem. Sounds like a really interesting place. It's a very interesting case of a city. It's surrounded by water. I believe if they didn't pump water out from their basements, that their skyscrapers would fall over. So they built a system that's going to collapse literally if their other systems fail. That doesn't seem too bright, but let's not focus on that. Let's talk about heating and cooling, and other cities, Chicago, Seattle, and LA, and Portland would be different cases. But these, New York and Chicago are interesting cases. I don't know how their climate differs, but I think that they're too hot in the summer and they're too cold in the winter. Right? They have both problems. So the perfect time to be there is in between those times. That's probably your best time to visit. Because I don't want to go there when it's really cold, and I don't want to go there when it's really hot. And I don't like muggy ever. And the thing is, in the buildings that they have, so, in terms of living there, the cost of ownership of a building, you're having to spend a lot of time cooling it down or heating it up. And I get the impression that a lot of them aren't very well insulated. Okay? And so they've gotten used to dumping energy into heating them and cooling them, and they're an extremely wealthy city overall. So most people will be wealthy enough to utilize resources, cheap energy, to heat it and cool it. But the building is built wrong. Because when those cheap energy systems go away, people are going to be very uncomfortable. I don't know if new buildings would be better. I don't know if old buildings would be better. I don't know all the design things about skyscrapers and stuff because I don't like skyscrapers. I don't think we should build over 4 stories and probably over 3. Pattern language says 3. I have theories about having 2 main levels, and I believe that a 4-story building is like a 3-story building with another building below it or something. I think in some cases it's justifiable. You need to check into construction methods and a bunch of stuff, but, I need a civil engineer and an architectural engineer to check all my work. I'll just make stuff up. But the general problem in the world, if you look at the population centers, I think I was starting to make this point before, the biggest population centers in the world, it's too hot. So their problem is it's too hot and too muggy. Now, I did talk with one guy online, some Scandinavian name or something, I don't know, Kare something. We might do a podcast later. And he believes that the solution for reducing the amount of energy on air conditioning is dehumidification of the air. And I think he's probably right. It makes sense if you think about it for just even a short time. Hot air is really uncomfortable if it is loaded with moisture. But if it's a dry heat, if it's dry hot air, then it doesn't bother you as much, right? And so using energy for dehumidification will increase the comfort quite a bit and do it with less energy cost than air conditioning would, cooling the actual air. We can do both. My solution is dig in. But digging in is a very expensive proposition, and basically I'm saying toss out your whole city because it sucks. The architecture sucks for your climate, and that's true. I mean, it's way more expensive to dig in. But you're looking at an investment that, if people continue to exist at all, if you build your building right, it should last 1,000 years. Why would it ever end? if you dig a nice space and you use a great rock work and you just do amazing stuff, and then we understand the physics of everything now, so we can design not because it looks like a colonial this or that, or not because it looks like a Tudor this or that, or whatever architectural style. We can design it for maximum efficiency in all energy systems, incoming stuff, waste, people within it being comfortable, temperature, humidity, all of it. So I still think digging in is the actual solution. However, I'm also interested in all kinds of solutions, and so his solution is a very interesting one. Because there's probably a lot of people who just suffer in the heat over there. I don't know. Maybe you get used to it. I don't know, but I couldn't handle it. I looked up the graphs online with WeatherSpark, and I compared it to various places where I know the weather, and I thought I would never live in that place. There were some big places in India that were just way too hot, and I think China as well. And so I bet you there's a lot of very uncomfortable people in those places, and that's unfortunate because they don't have to live that way. Digging in, this other thing, I'll interview that guy, get you his name. I'll put in a link somewhere. I'll probably forget. Oh, man. So sore from yesterday. There's still burning going down the lake. A lot of that this time of year. Hey, lazy dog. Hey, what are you doing? You're very lazy. Aren't you supposed to do something? She's looking at me like I'm nuts. This is the lay around because it's too hot out time of the day. And as I do mention that we want to warm the buildings up here, I think the importance of shade is extremely important. And I'm doing that two ways. The primary way I'm doing it, building shade, is by building a forest that's designed to provide tons of shade. So for days like this, right? This is why there's siesta, because it's either too hot or it's raining most of the year. That's great. But the two hot times are actually harder for me because I like to walk around. Actually, and the rains come for a bit and then they go, and it's sunny and pleasant out. These days, look, there's not a cloud. Well, there's clouds over there. Say there's not a cloud in the sky. There's a tiny one over there. But this is not sufficient cloudiness to provide shade. So this is this roof right here. Let's evaluate it briefly. This is the porch of the terraza, right? The porch of the terraza has this stuff, which is fiberglass, like wavy fiberglass stuff. I don't know what that's called. Laminate. And then the other part is Onduline. I think I already covered this in some video. But let's talk about the light part of it rather than materials as much. It's partly lit, and it's very comfortable. Ideally, we would use polycarbonate for this, and ideally we would find a source of shaded glass and figure out a way to make metal structures that will last forever. I mean, this thing won't last forever, it's just wood. But, even maybe for a non-enclosed space, like I think about that when I think of making a greenhouse, right? I want to make wally peonies with the roof and all protected. But even for an open air porch like this, I think that doing translucent, some of them translucent glass, and then others of them fully shaded, is a good idea. And even doing fairly large areas of each, or in some cases they could intersperse, but if it's just half and half like here, it's not perfect. In retrospect, in this case, I know why I did that. Yeah. Well, whatever. There are details. I should probably take a shower someday. It's been a while, but I don't care. I don't feel that dirty yet. I could soak my feet. That'd be good. What time is it? Hot days. So I mentioned that I'm putting in this forest to create shade. But the truth is I've also left lots of places, most of the whole place is shade. And what we really should do is, like over here I've got a grove that's just perfect for this, where we kind of cut a trail into it before, but I could just put some metal chairs in there or some wood rounds, although real chairs are better. But put a circle of them in there and maybe a spot where somebody could hang a hammock, figure out like a couple good trees, and then maybe even, I don't know, leave up an adjustable strap or something, or figure out a way that we can have really easy connection points for people to connect into, or have a tree with a hook on it and then have multiple other trees with hooks on it, and then the person can just hook onto the one that fits the best. We could even measure them. That seems like a lot of thought involved, but we can't just leave hammocks out. I have been to a couple of places where they leave hammocks out, and that's cool. And actually, that is pretty cool. I want to be able to support people who have their own hammock, but the truth is that if the place is ever prosperous, it would be worth it to have hammocks available. I mean, people associate Mexico with hammocks. You know, hammocks are considered the ultimate in luxury comfortableness. So I think what we would do with those is that you would actually, see, I don't want to make much overhead. I think here's the deal. I don't like seeing hammocks get ripped up. Like people get in them with like things on their clothes that catch onto it, and the strings eventually get pulled out. And so I've watched hammocks I paid a bunch for, usually at the beach. When I've gone to the beach, I buy hammocks, right? Bring them up here. And then they get left out in the rain. That's a big problem. Basically, here's the deal is you can't leave hammocks out. Not in a place that isn't shaded all the time and that sticks will fall on it or something. It's too chaotic. I think we can do a couple things. One is reinvent the hammock and do rope hammocks. And actually, there was a guy online I saw a long time ago, and he was weaving rope hammocks and rope platforms that were to be suspended. And if we built those strong and simple, we could actually have carabiners on them, find the perfect spots for them, or even make them for the perfect spot. And those trees would serve to support that thing that was built for that spot for a long time. You could actually do that down below Bliss. There's a bunch of oaks down there where it's already scheduled to have a bunch of tree houses, and hammocks would fit in well with tree houses, I feel like. It's also very shaded, mostly north-facing slope, so it's a lot of cool shade in there. Yeah, so that grove over, back to this grove over here, that could be done right away. I like the idea of wood rounds, just taking one tree and then cutting into wood rounds, and then use them as seats, around a fire or something. And the thing is, they're not super comfortable. You kind of have to be more alert, and they're good for a fire. You are a little bit alert at a fire. You're relaxed, but you're kind of, the smoke comes your way sometimes. You might want to get up and go somewhere. It just works at a fire somehow. You still got to put resin on the bottom oven, something, and then paint the top so we can tell the difference between top and bottom. And the bottom part is protected against a lot of water. If they're not in use, maybe we even put them on some rocks or I don't know, but they're going to be pretty big, so they're hard to move. The thing is that they eventually become junk and firewood. Now, if we paint the top, they're not as good for firewood because that's a little bit toxic. We could see about, paints that aren't toxic. The other thing about the paint is I don't want it to get on someone's clothes. Of course, when we cut these rounds, we get the resin out because the resin, if it was a pine tree, which it would be a pine tree, then the resin gets in your clothes. And so around here, you do got to watch out for that. There's nothing at the moment. We've cleaned everything up. But if we cut more wood rounds, there will be more resiny, gross seats. I like that idea a little bit, but they're not as comfortable. And I like this seat right here. It's a wood one we made. I'll show it to you. I already showed you. It's like that one over there, but better. We angled the back a little bit. A lot of chairs around here have a straight back, and it's very uncomfortable. The better things are these metal chairs over here. And they cast those somehow across the lake. And so I could pull up there and order for delivery, potentially, or take away a bunch of furniture. And this would be a great investment for the Bosque. I made benches out of wood before with wood right in the ground. The posts rotted and fell over. We want longer term solutions. And so putting some metal chairs in there would be just awesome. Also, as we talk about these bird things, that's an interesting example. We like the shade to put a bird oasis in there. But the problem is it doesn't have any sun to get solar, and so we would have to run it on electric. So, and there's no south side to put it on. So now here in this new forest I'm making, I've actually got lots and lots of spots where I have electricity. Well, I have one line of electric run out, but I could tap into it at various points. So I could put in there a number of smaller electric bird baths. The problem is then we have to feed those again. So the maintenance aspect of all these systems is super important, especially since often I'm the only person here, or have been. And so I'm building systems for people who aren't here to maintain them or enjoy them. That's okay. A lot of people have in the past, and they will again, and it's going to be way better. Yeah, I should write down all the factors actually out of this video of like what factors determine how you would design your oasis, your bird and wildlife watering rock garden thing. Oh, I didn't mention that there'd be plants in it too. Don't put them in the wrong spot. Don't put them in where they contaminate or block the channels of water, because this thing is going to be sculpted in a way that the water comes down in different pools, and then how far it can come down and how much we can run it depends on a bunch of factors. The problem is only so many birds can land in a spot at one time, so we really want more than one spot. And this is one reason to go ahead and invest in a way to fill that that cistern pretty easily, because it could be that we can't make it so that we don't have to feed it more water. It could be that it's impossible, and that's okay. We have water in places. We can end up putting oases also below places that we know we're going to build something that will capture water. We can deliver it for now. Or we can also start with, like I said, overflows, where we just start. I mean, even running water in the summer would still help. During the rains, that would still help a lot. And that's a case where we're not making the commitment to the birds that we're going to provide them with water all year long, but we're making it so that when there's a surplus of water here anyway, it gets captured into things and gets filled many things automatically. The overflows are the best thing right now. I'm wasting water because I can't handle it all. It could be under spots where it's just falling anyway. We may want to get, barrels rust and stuff, so that's tricky. Some people use plastic barrels, not a fan of plastic. Oh well. So what can you do? Anyway, so that water even captures into a barrel, and then that water goes through a tube and gets put into anywhere else. Like I've got a spot on the other side of this building where the gutter's bad. I can fix the gutter or not care. I should fix the gutter probably. But since I'm not caring, I could easily just slap a barrel in there, be quick to just get that water out away from the building also, because we don't actually want that near the base of the building. That's a problem on this one over here when it overflows. And then we can have it go into any series of pools, which we could brainstorm, like what's the easiest way to create a bunch of shallow containers, because that's really the issue is. And we don't want it to be really deep. And that's because you have to either go deep or go shallow. I don't want to be in the middle that much. If I go deeper, then I can raise carp and I can raise fish, and like ornamental koi from Japan or something. I could do a lot of things with water that's deep. I could use it later in the year. But the idea for birds is to create shallow, and it has to be above dog level, shallow water things. And if that was done, it only worked during the summer. Okay, there's no pumps involved. It's just a cascading series of shallow containers, and we could add a bunch of them. And then in the summer, at least, there would be like this infinite amount of bird bath opportunities. The reason we're not going in between shallow and deep is because of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are one of the worst enemies in the world. They're just really bad, bad, bad. If they all died tomorrow, the ecosystem would adjust and it would be fine. And humans would really appreciate it because, they're the biggest killers in the world, those mosquitoes. And the diseases that they carry. It's actually not the mosquitoes' fault entirely. It's not like they're planning to hurt you or anything. They're just planning to get a little bit of blood, a tiny bit. But anyway, so we don't want to create any mosquito habitat with these oasi. Maybe I'll just say oasi. It sounds funny. Oases just sound. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? So some of these could actually be very natural looking, and that's what I'm imagining. That's why I mentioned rock work, and I actually want them to look as natural as possible. And so we work with the size of rocks we have, what we got. I do want to work with larger rocks in many cases. If we use smaller rocks, it is by definition going to look very fake. And so it's a little odd because we need that base part to just go up, right? We could even have it go up and out a little bit, I don't know. But then it's going to be a real task to build that correctly. We can also think of other things such as concrete. Would we make a concrete sculpture around a tinaco, like ferro cement perhaps, where we free sculpt it? We have a rebar and a chicken wire mix, and we sculpt it into a shape all around this tinaco, leaving the top open so we can get to it, but also making it so we can cover it up and we don't have stuff running into it. Really make a good top for it. You could even make a ferro cement top, although it sounds heavy. And then this one would just all be sculptures of concrete. It could be geometrical patterns. It can be anything we want, where it's made so that water comes down it. Now, for the ones that are just overflow in the rainy season, those are actually going to have a bunch of water that flows down them. However, it will flow down while it's raining, right? It's while that thing fills up and it overflows, and so no one's going to see it. So that's an odd case where we could get back to the electricity thing and think, okay, so if we had a 5,000, 7,000 liter cistern and it was all covered with rock sculptures or concrete sculptures that were abstract, then how much electricity does it take to run it? What volume of water? And I think that's just on the pump's specification. So it's all about the pump. Although the pump has to be able to pump up also. These are tiny pumps, right? And they're really weak. And so we want it to pump a fairly long vertical distance for what it's normally used for. People use pumps like this for tiny fountains and aquariums and things like that. We need one that is kind of strong, that it can pull up from the bottom of that, because near the end, the water will be down at the bottom. So, it'd be emptying out. Wow, that's tough, What can you do? It could be that at the bottom we want a hidden spigot, that we build into the sculpture, a little hidden thing, and it's a tiny locking door, and there's a spigot there that we can open it without too much difficulty and have the water that's in that pour out of it. And that's a bright idea, because we could then use that to fill another cistern downhill. Because one of them is the overflow from one place, and so we could just keep building downhill and keep making oases, right? And so we could have an overflow on it, but we could also have a drain on it. And which one we use would depend on the system. But as long as we have control of both the input and the output, we're set. Of course, that can happen later. The idea behind putting in the llave, the key, the spigot on the bottom, is so that we have the option later. And I would really rather a kind of larger industrial one of those rather than a tiny one that's just for a hose. Like maybe we should look at marine supply places and then have at least part of the hose go out to a location where we could change something if we needed to. Maybe it still goes into two smaller hoses, or I don't know what happens. But I don't like things getting clogged up. I don't like systems that you can't repair. And those are easy to build. It's really easy to get lazy with design and make things that then cost you more in the long run. Like everything we built, almost. Not everything, but a lot of buildings we build, it's just asking for trouble. They're built for this civilization, and this civilization is not going to be here. So, if a space that we develop or affect can be created as a space that has multi-uses, that's way better. Like I was thinking about the shade areas I mentioned, like over there where we can, clear out some seating in there and have a shady spot to sit. This unnamed grove between Bliss and the View. And then nearby there's also the Nest, and that's ready to go. It's a great spot. It's very central, and there's even electricity over there. So that's a huge benefit. Let's say you wanted to sit in the shade, and while you're sitting there, you also want to charge your stuff. That might be Nest might be a great place for a charging station. That people use it during the day. We could put it on a timer if we had to. We can dig in a little thing in the slope there and make it so there's a bunch of USB ports and charger objects. Even then, though, I'd want to put it in a tent, I guess. That's a little tricky. If it's shady, it's shady. I don't know. But in other words, using the natural shade is obviously better than building it, since building it costs a lot more. It still costs something to build this to be down there. And you know what? It's not as shady as you'd think. I think of that as a shady spot. There's shady parts in there. The problem is a lot of it is white oaks, which lose their leaves during the spring here. Fall happens in the spring here. And so the problem is they then don't block the sun. And so we lose the deep shade. This gets back into the issue of, should we preferentially have black oaks in some places? And I think yes. I've waffled on that. But essentially, like in this View Park over here that I'm developing, we can't trust the white oaks to provide shade. We can still develop them, and we can, I think we could even go through and put a ribbon on them if we need to know always, even when they look very similar. They look kind of different once you get to know them. But we could start to pick the white oaks and then sculpt those into furniture or shapes or whatever, more so than the black oaks, because we want the black oaks to go up and provide shade up there. Now, we also use the lower branch of the black oaks in the same way as the white oaks, but we want to make sure that we encourage that canopy of black oak shade, because we want multiple levels of branches above head level. And so since the top of it is another 2 meters above that, we've really got this window, this horizontal window of space in which to grow these black oaks. I mentioned the black oaks because that's what we have the most of right now. What we have is going to change. But the pines mostly won't be useful for this. They'll play their part. Actually, they may end up working out great. I don't know. I've never sculpted a pine this way. I have nut trees I want to put in there, except like the nut tree I'm looking at over here, which is a really pretty one. It's like a few meters tall now. It's just doing great. It put out its new leaves. This is the end of March, and it put out a bunch of new leaves. It's very happy, and I'd like to see those leaves coming in this time of year as well, because a lot of other things are losing their leaves, and it's a very hard time of year to be here for a plant. And so the fact that they're beginning this early means that when the rains come, they're just going to be totally ready to suck that all up and turn all that photosynthesis into energy and grow the tree. I mean, it's doing pretty good. I want 100 more nut trees like that. But what I just said kind of contraindicates like what I want. I want shade all the time in this garden, and that one's not going to provide it during part of the year. On the other hand, it's a small tree. If it was really, really, really big, and it's just just in March it's gotten so it isn't cold, so it's only getting too hot now, and so maybe that's a great time for the leaves to show up, and maybe it's okay that it didn't shade in the winter. I don't know. We'll decide these things. Every tree has its place and its purpose. But for now, the point is, the thing to remember for the design guidelines of how to make this park, and potentially for you how to make one somewhere else in the world, is to take this tree that has leaves all year long and get that horizontal band going. They'll become easier to climb, by the way, and maintain once the lateral branches become easier for climbing on. And that's something to consider as we develop this, is let's make trees that are actually kind of easy to climb on. Also, kids like to climb on trees. I wasn't thinking of this park for kids that much. In fact, I was kind of thinking not that. But if I accidentally make a great place for climbing on trees that isn't, like they'll die, I can put sawdust under them and stuff, and they can climb on them like a jungle gym. And okay, and they shouldn't fall down. They will. But that's how they learn not to fall down, I guess. This is a very complex little park. Because really what I'm trying to figure out is the system by which we design, really how we develop these kind of things. And it's been a little surprising along the way. I'm going to be doing other ones like it, but I'll be doing them in my climate. And so if you like this idea, if this idea excites you of sculpting a tree park, you're going to find that in your space, there's going to be differences in what you need to do. I would encourage you to publish your own videos, write up your own experiences, say how it's different. Maybe it's wetter at a different time of the year. Maybe it's wetter in general. Maybe you have very different trees to work with. It just depends a lot on your climate. So anyway, thoughts are welcome. Good luck. So as we look at sculpting a forest, this is an interesting case, is by the side of roadways, right? Now my goal is to have there be a canopy above this of trees. But I don't want it down here. I actually want lots of space here. So once the tree gets old enough, right, and it's already growing up and out wherever it wants, we've already cut this one a little bit and it's just coming back. These side branches that go into the road, as soon as there's stuff above them, we would want to cut them. These lower ones are kind of ready now. These lower two I would cut. Maybe leave that one, but that one's going to go eventually too. Because eventually we want the canopy above where the height of the highest vehicle. And maybe a little extra, but this is an oak, so it can do that. Pine trees are a different choice. The madrones really don't provide that much shade anyway. So it's really oaks we're looking at sculpting with. This tree over here is a better example because it has a whole set under it. No, you could still cut a little bit, but not all of it. I just don't want to do it all at once, There's a branch coming right out in the road over there from a really big oak. Just get rid of that. There's a whole little tree coming into the road. Cut that little tree and then let the other ones grow over the road. So basically we're looking at kind of making the road into a tunnel or a corridor in a way. I think that's a good idea because then on a really important ground that we use for transport of people and cars and things, we can actually have a wider corridor but have it still be fairly closed in and not let the sun hit the ground. That's always our thing, is that we don't want the sun to hit the ground. it's just a rule. We're not going to follow it. You know, I'm not good at following the rules, but that should be one of the things we consider very strongly as we do anything near a road with trees, and as we do with buildings and things like that, is how can we keep the sun from ever heating the ground? And why do I say that? I don't know. There should be places to sit in the sun, okay? People want to be in the sun. That's great. We'll have like plaza-like things, like baby plazas, and there's, you know, sun traps and really cool spots. But it's either a building. Obviously, the sun didn't hit the ground there. Although we want to use that sun, so we should think solar hot water heaters, solar panels, any way to use sun, we can. But let's consider out in the forest, right? Is that that's the very definition of whether it has a lot of biomass or not. If there can be a tree, there should be a tree, you know? And ideally, I mean, that's the thing about the live oaks and deciduous things. That's why I kind of discriminate against them a little bit, is because, no, the live oaks, I mean, the other one's white oaks, not black oaks. Live oaks are the black oaks, right? They don't lose their leaves, the white oaks do. So I kind of don't like it that the oaks lose their leaves this time of year. And so it does make me discriminate against them a little bit. I think that the only benefit is that below them, they provide this constant source of very easy to collect composted oak leaves. And I'm not talking about oak leaves that you scrape off and then take somewhere else to compost. The point is that they're compost making machines. Under them, you get this quite thick, over years, you get a very thick layer of composted oak leaves, and that's super useful, immensely useful. Now, understand that that's a resource that if we were to be able to collect it, right now we can't collect it as fast as being produced. It's being produced 50 to 100 times more than we're collecting, maybe 1,000. We barely scrape off any of it. I wish that I had the labor to have people come out here with wheelbarrows, buy some more wheelbarrows even, get some more hand tools like shovels and rakes, and sometimes costales, which is bags that you fill, and just do a massive scrape and then put it into the spaces I find most important. I would love to mulch the entire View Park with Tierra de Encino, composted oak leaves. But understand this, that's a resource that will take a while to replenish. On the other hand, it just sits there. So one woman was here and she didn't really like the idea of collecting Tierra de Encino. She felt like it might hurt the tree. I do not think it will. It definitely changes the ecosystem in that one spot. And I'd be more interested in its effect on mushrooms than I would be in its effect on the tree. I think for the tree, it's, you know, shed skin, dead hair. It's not interested. Of course, it still protects the root system and those other things, and yeah, it's all part of the system, yay. But I think we can easily scrape off quite a bit, and it's really a matter of just how much labor we can toss at it. I mean, the idea of collecting it all would just be this colossally years-long process by a team of people, and so I'm not worried about overutilizing the resource or anything. I guess what I'm saying is that there's reasons to have trees, even in this case, where I don't like the fact that they lose their leaves. There are some byproducts of that are very beneficial. So it's hard to see sometimes the full system. In fact, it's impossible. But we do what we can. So I cooked up some food in the simplest way possible. I opened up a few cans. I might do a little bit of introduction on those cans and why they have different ecological costs. Also, I was wondering about that. Like, I want the cooking, yeah. We use those cans, by the way. I'm using cans because I'm here alone at the moment and there's no centralized kitchen system, which there needs to be. And I shouldn't be in charge of it. But I was wondering about the cans. I do like to rip the labels off, you know, and burn them because they're ugly. Could use them for art, I guess. We could like cut them out and paste them all over in a big collage, actually. That'd be pretty funny. Maybe I should have a special spot for little box in the kitchen for you know, can labels, or wherever the cans go out of the kitchen, they collect them there, somewhere. Anyway, the cans are going to get used for plants, and those will be plants mostly that go somewhere else. And so they're kind of a waste. We're not going to melt them down, probably. You know, canned food is not the ideal way to go, but it is for me because it moves time around for me. And the scale of cooking for myself is very bad. Oh, which reminds me, I'm the worst part of the cooking because I'm cooking a couple things, and so I have a pot on the stove, but I also have food. Once the food goes in my stomach, I'll no longer be hungry. I'll forget I'm cooking and wander off. that's a reason to have a centralized cooking staff that can actually pay attention. The other thing is I think that if everybody cooks for themselves versus a system where they just show up and eat and there's a system that's cranking out food, I believe the total amount of labor involved with the cooking plummets radically with the latter, the professional kitchen that's cranking out food. If everybody's doing all their own cooking, not only will there be more waste, but there's also more waste of time. And so when people come here as participants, that's one of the reasons I want a centralized cooking system, so that we can stuff food in people's faces, healthy, good, economical food. And then if they do any cooking, they do it for fun and because it's really neat. Oh, I still got to remember, I've got some on the stove. I've also got dogs that would steal this food, maybe. I'm not sure if I left it there. That's a problem. So when we think about the design of those kind of things, we basically have people, making their beverage in their tiny stove, in their tiny house, and maybe they're doing some barbecue because they like meat and there's no meat on the menu, and maybe they're cooking things that they in different ways, like burying a pig and stuff like that. A lot of ways to cook, or maybe they're really picky about what they eat and they want to bring all their own food. That sounds like a mess, but I probably would not be inclined to invite such a person or accept them, because I feel like people who are really picky about their food, this is not always the case. People who are really picky about their food are often really picky about everything else. And they basically use it as a control mechanism for controlling others. Now, I've had people get angry, get angry at me for saying such a thing, because she's not like that. Well, I didn't say so. Oh, wow, that was a cool bird. What bird is that? Oh, I disturbed it. Please do, bird. Use the water. Oh, it's like a reddish bird, sort of a orange bird. With a brown back. The belly is the orange part and it's gradiated. Pretty neat bird. Anyway, that's just my impression from some people I've seen. I don't mean to apply anything I say really to anyone. I say lots of stuff, just like, it's stereotypes, it's things based on my experience, it's things to be concerned about. And I think all those are valid. They're based on my experience, and how I interpret things, of course, is massively skewed by who I am. Big surprise. That's how we all are. But I really feel like people get way too wrapped up in having specialized food needs, and it turns out that poor people who have limited food options have less weird food needs. It's not that great. Maybe I'll add some spices. So some guys came by, chatted for a bit, and then I remembered I had something on the stove. I don't have my thing I wear when I'm cooking something, and I wouldn't remember it anyway, maybe. And fuck. What's going on over here? Anyway, that's another reason that people, shouldn't be in the kitchen, trapped in there. I really think kitchen is a function that should be centralized as much as possible within the confines of your economic system and people being free, and that people should really only have to cook when they want to, when it's fun, and that nobody should be slaving away in the kitchen unless they're getting paid for it. And so I actually want the staff in the kitchen to either be people who want to come here and they get a big discount, fairly big one, because maybe they're working half time in the kitchen. And then other people, I can have locals as paid staff who I can set up a really solid system of recurring food production, and the total amount of labor that goes into it could just plummet by comparison to everyone having to cook everything and everyone having their own full kitchen like they do in normal society. I think we got a better way we can do things in this space anyway. What that means for the rest of the world, I don't know. It really depends on too many situations to apply each system that I end up with here as being right for other places. I think we can experiment with variables and learn and then share that knowledge, but I'm very interested in what other people do in their spaces as well, because one solution does not fit all.